alone, no chaperone can get our number. The world's in slumber, let's misbehave. There's something wild about you, child, that's so contagious. Let's be outrageous, let's misbehave.
You sort of know from the outset this is an impossible situation. They have to be together, and yet they can't be together. So
But then it seems to work out for them.
Well, you don't know. I mean, the ending is it's left open. I mean, can they maintain this platonic relationship?
It's ambiguous.
It is. It is.
It's morally ambiguous.
It is. I think the thing is, the one thing they do want is bohemia. They want art and bohemia.
Yes.
And one fascinating thing in the Noel Coward, Gilda is an interior designer, and after she marries Max Plunkett, she continues with her career. And my first thought, well, that's interesting. It seems like a sort of more feminist thing that she keeps on with her career. But in fact, Gilda is a much stronger figure because she's the anchor of the whole thing, and she's the mother of the arts and the inspiration, and she's the critic, the manager. She keeps them at it. So it's a very powerful
Right.
role.
She is negotiating contracts. She gets the play produced.
Mhm.
She's negotiating commissions on the painting. I mean, she is.
It's true, and it provides the framework. I don't know how Coward does it, but she's necessary. So it provides the sort of a framework that feels organic. That she's operating in this way, and they fit together in this way. I don't know how they maintain the Menage a Trois in the Noel Coward if she continues her work, but I think she's the one that keeps it going.
Yes. Well, obviously this movie has a lot of sex as an implication underlying, and there was an esteemed film critic, perhaps you know him, his name was Andrew Sarris, and he said that screwball comedy is a sex comedy without the sex.
Yeah.
And of course, for those of you in the audience who know, Andrew Sarris was the consort of Molly Haskell, a 40-year-plus marriage, and they were a real-life screwball comedy couple. And at one time, even working Good one. Working in competing publications, and so partners in business, partners in life.
He said something wonderful, which I was going to read, and I don't think I brought it, but about the difference between Lubitsch and Preston.
Microphone.
Oh, sorry. I don't think I have it anyway. We'll go on talking, but I mean, you can see the ellipses. That's basically what that touch is, and he does certain things, and he leads you up to the door and not beyond it.
You see a lot of doors. You never see what's going on beyond the door.
It's sort of like, Feydeau is sort of the famous French playwright farceur, and his whole thing was different couples matching up with different partners and going in and out of bedroom doors. And this is sort of Feydeau with feeling, the underlying feeling. And I just was struck this time about that sort of tone of melancholy that sort of underrides the whole thing. There's always, I feel it. I mean, they have to be together. This is it's organic. It's necessary to each one in different ways, and yet somehow can it really be maintained?
It's complicated.
Yeah.
And I don't think that Lubitsch offers us any easy answers.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot is implied. There are a lot of things that are left. It's very nuanced and subtle and discreet and fun and playful at the same time. We talk about Lubitsch and the fact of what makes his films so distinctive. First of all, of course, the women. Lubitsch women are remarkable, and he treated them very differently. He showcases them. They are driving the plot. They're unconventional, self-determined. His visuals are very sumptuous, and also with the ellipses, with the subtle, what is unseen in them that we get to fill in with our imagination. There are three that are quite apparent in this film that we should probably touch upon. The opening scene, that wordless, efficient opening scene where you don't hear a thing, there's no dialogue spoken, and yet you learn how attractive she finds these gentlemen, they find her very attractive, and then when they're resting, and she rests her legs between them.
It's wonderful when she puts her legs up on the seat. They're still sort of half sleeping, and she puts her legs up on the seat between them. And what's great about that is she's both joining them and separating them.
Yes, exactly.
At the same time. And I think that's really the sort of paradox that's sort of underlying the whole thing.
And there was a lot of ink spilled about Ben Hecht abandoning Noel Coward's words.
Well, I think one of the great things, I think in the Noel Coward, I think Lutton Fontanne were very kind of la-di-da. They were European, they didn't belong anywhere. They were the creatures of the world. They were cosmopolitan, sort of superior to everybody. And I think that may have sort of put people off a little bit. They weren't in that horrible word we use now. They weren't relatable. But these two, I think Hecht Americanizes it.
Yes.
So they're very American. I mean, they start out with the saluting each other that way.
As a journalist, he writes with brevity. He writes using American slang and American language that we can all relate to. So the arch British words are foreign and off-putting to many Americans.
And also, there's a sort of naivete of all of them, which you would not have if you had people of the world. They would have
ultra
been around.
sophisticates.
Yeah, and probably a little more playing around with the two men kind of thing. And in fact, I'm sure, from what I've read, that's what we're talking about, the movie Challengers, that he does. I don't know if he, because Call Me By Your Name had this whole homoerotic theme in it, so that's sort of true characteristic of Guadagnino. But I think it's, and what's fascinating is Zendaya, who's the woman in the center of the triangle, she's having an injury, so she can no longer play. She was a professional player as well, so she can no longer play. So she's managing their career. So it's a very sort of Gilda-like role.
Well, and I think there is a real tone of homoerotica in this film.
Well,
there is a love between those two gentlemen.
Absolutely,
It comes through very strong.
Yeah. Well, I think the one moment where you get a little titter about that is when he comes and he sees Fredric Marsh for the first time since he's come home, and he's just so glad to see him, and he goes and hugs him, and oh, sorry, I forgot to kiss you, Gilda. So that moment is a little frisson. But there's just chemistry just circling all the way around.
Yes.
I think it's just, I mean, you don't stop and think about, you don't spell it out in any clinical terms.
And what a master filmmaker Lubitsch is, because he conveys all that, and yet there's nothing written, there was nothing objectionable, the censors passed it with flying colors, and yet, wow!
It's racy, so get out.
Yeah, it's quite provocative, even today it's provocative.
And I don't know what happens between her and Edward Hart on the wedding night. Well, first of all, I kept thinking, before that, when the scene when she's coming in looking at the flowers, she's running back and forth, and I kept thinking Runaway Bride, because that's the role that Claudette Colbert played in It Happened One Night. She's running away from this stuffy man.
Well, she doesn't want to go in that wedding bedroom. You can just tell that.
She's got to get away before that happens.
And those flowers, so you
she's
can
running back and forth.
It's like atoms are moving frantically as she's getting more and more agitated as she looks at those phallic tulips.
And from his demeanor the next morning, I gather it didn't go well in his terms.
Well, and he kicks the flower pot. Again, all this Lubitsch symbolism, this is the Lubitsch touch. I understand from my research that Lubitsch talks about this watershed moment for him when he was watching Charlie Chaplin's A Woman of Paris. And he saw that Chaplin used the former fiance comes in to visit his beloved that he's lost, and a collar shirt stay drops on the ground, and Chaplin lets the camera focus on it a bit so that we learn that, that she's already moved on, she has a new man in her life, and Lubitsch said, once I saw that, and he ran with it in terms of working that into his films.
And he does it through objective correlatives, as they say. And this is something, I can't imagine any of that being done in a play. It has to be spelled out.
Right.
You really can't, you can't focus, you can't ask the audience to look at the little pot.
And film is a visual medium. If you want to hear Noel Coward's words, you should go see the play. But if you want to see a masterwork of visual storytelling, you can't get much better than Design for a Living.
And I think the casting is just so perfect because, as I said earlier, Fredric Marsh really didn't do it. I think the only other comedy I can think of is Nothing Sacred, which comes after this. But he's just so good at it because he can play the sort of pompous, self-involved. No, they both have these sort of narcissistic sides to them. But and Gary Cooper is always seen as sort of the strong, silent type. And here he's just goofy and sort of,
He's outstanding.
yeah. He's
And
so
Lubitsch used him twice more in 2 other screwball comedies, Bluebeard's Eighth Wife
You're right.
and Desire. So with Marlene Dietrich, he's fantastic, but the good actors, many of them can move from genre to genre. Today, we don't think of Gary Cooper as a screwball hero, anti-hero, but he does a fantastic job with it.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true, and it also creates so that it's never sort of obviously romantic, and that's another thing that gives that sort of comic dimension, so that we don't have to take anything too seriously.
Right.
You know, and yet at the same time we sort of do.
Well, and the wordplay is so clever. Ben Hecht, you can't say enough about him. You talked about him in the intro, that he is one of the giants of all of film history in terms of his screenwriting, credited and uncredited. It's often hard to know exactly the breadth of his work because there were so many
That he worked on
screenplays that he didn't get screen credit for. But I must point out, for our screwball-loving audience, some of the other screwball comedies that he did write. Of course, you mentioned The Front Page and the sexual switch on His Girl Friday, which is huge. 20th Century, Nothing Sacred, It's a Wonderful World, and Howard Hawks' Monkey Business, to name some of the screwball comedies. The man was gifted with language and humor, and he's an ideal writer for screwball comedies.
He really is. I mean, Lubitsch also used Samson Rapelson.
Yes.
Who's
His
also
number one.
brilliant. Yeah, he's the greatest. The Shop Around the Corner. But the Hecht is more kind of sort of urban and energetic. You know, there's a difference in the two. I think Rapelson had that sort of Middle European.
Yes, a little more courtly,
Yeah,
and it
yeah,
isn't as
yeah,
rough
and
and tumble as Ben Hecht.
We're all alone, no chaperone can get our number. The world's in slumber, let's misbehave. There's something wild about you, child, that's so contagious. Let's be outrageous, let's misbehave. When Adam won Eve's hand, he wouldn't stand for teasing. He didn't care